Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of All Caps. I'm Isaac Anderson, author of A Song of Bones and the Garden Maze. I'm joined by my co-host here, Tim McKay, the author of The Fall of Selvandrea, and we have a very, very special guest, Tim Carter, the author of Major Domo and writer of the hit video game Sleeping Dogs. Welcome to the show. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing very well. Thanks very much. Great to meet you guys.
Great to have you on.
Yeah, you're out in BC, right? Fellow Canada dweller.
I am. I'm hearing our audio a little off sync. Are you guys?
Is my audio, or both?
How's
There's
mine?
like about
a
3 or 4 second delay, so I'm hearing you speak, but then also hearing it in the background.
Oh, that's weird.
Do you have a tab open somewhere? You might have the YouTube open somewhere.
Oh, you know what? There we are. That's my fault. Oh, another rookie.
I did that same thing one time. I was like, "What is going on?
What is going on?" I think I average one complete rookie move at the beginning of every single podcast or YouTube show. So hopefully that's my one for the day.
Well, so do we. So you're in good company for anyone who caught our last show, which was with another Tim or Timmy, and we had some great
Something
very
about the
entertaining.
Tims. Something about the Tims bring little technical things.
The Timocracy, as we discussed on X earlier. There are a lot of Tim authors around, so clearly we're all in the right spot.
Well, thanks. And sorry, I'm super happy to be here, but your last question got overrun by the text I had open.
Yeah, so I was just asking, you're in British Columbia here in Canada, right?
I am, absolutely. I'm on Pender Island right now, but I spend a lot of my time in Vancouver.
Beautiful area, absolutely beautiful. I mean, I have family out in BC. My uncle and then some friends who moved out that way. Over the years, definitely jealous. Definitely feeling some. Don't get me wrong, Ottawa's a beautiful spot too, but in terms of great spots in Canada to be, Vancouver and Pender Island. I mean, oh my gosh, yeah, you kind of living the author dream right now on more than one level, eh?
As I was saying earlier, it really is amazing out here. I mean, I was born on Vancouver Island, so this is home for me. Although I lived in LA for many years, and I've certainly been out to Ottawa. Once upon a time, I used to work for the government a little bit, and but I'm really lucky and fortunate both to be in Vancouver, but then to have a chance to bob out to the islands is really pretty special.
So we'll get into what took you to LA. Very excited to talk about some of that. So how long then have you been back in Vancouver and Pender Island?
I came back to Vancouver in 2008 when not the last writer's strike, but the writer's strike before that was on. I had several shows sort of booted out of big studios or television networks. So I came home, honestly, because there was literally no work in Los Angeles. And I was working in the film and TV industry, obviously, at the time. And I had so many friends that had gone into video games who were like, "Oh, we're just dying for writers. Could you, just come work for a weekend? Can you just come fix something for us, right, on Saturday morning?" And I'm like, "Oh, okay, this is crazy." And I never went back. So,
what is it about writing for video games that you like more or less than writing for film and TV? Like, what's the difference there?
First of all, I'm a huge gamer and have been since, I'm old enough, you can tell by the gray hair. Like, I was around when video games first came out, right? I was in high school in 1985 and 1986 when the very first PC games came on the market. And it was like this amazing revelation. So I've just been in, it's kind of working with your dream material on some level. But it's a different form of storytelling. It challenges your mind to figure out how you're going to engage the audience and how you're going to sort of get the emotional reaction you want out of people. So that's one part of it. And then I think also just from a straight making a living point of view, I worked in Hollywood for years and I made movies. I wrote movies. I produced a variety of things. So I had a certain amount of success. But the first time I worked on a video game, again, someone just sort of called me and said, "Hey, can you come in for a week?" And on the Thursday of that day, someone went by and put a check on my desk. And I'm like, "What's this?" And they're like, "Well, it's payday." And I'm like, okay, in the film industry, it would be 6 months from the time you did the work till you saw any money. So there's an extent to which, it is lovely to be the hired gun who comes in with, you know, a very focused task and just gets to do that task is really sort of, there's something about that that's really rewarding.
I think a lot of
Well,
authors right now hear that and immediately think, "Oh, that's the dream," you know, something you can actually live off of, and even just video games right now, such an incredible spot to be. But like you said, it wasn't always the case, or just people didn't know of it as this lucrative opportunity that it has absolutely exploded into. So, uh, what a dream, you know. But
Thanks.
maybe
Yeah.
maybe rewind a bit. Can you like let's talk about that journey then, and specifically into writing for and producing. I want to ask a bit about producing and what challenges that adds if you're doing both writing and producing. But yeah, tell us about the journey into film. Um,
Sure. So I always wanted to be a writer and I always wanted to tell stories. And if you'd asked me in, you know, the seventh grade, I just said, oh, I'm going to be a novelist one day. So it's very rewarding now to actually be one. But
yeah.
when and then I worked in various forms of corporate writing when I graduated from university. So annual reports, I worked for graphic design companies. Then I
Mhm.
transitioned into print magazines and managed to get to the point where I was managing editor of a decent sized magazine, but it was a magazine about car crash injuries. So not some,
Huh.
Hmm.
you know, it was a really good gig, but it wasn't the sort of thing I wanted to be doing. And so when I made the jump, I was living in Vancouver, and Vancouver at that time was a hub of film and TV production.
Mhm.
So I didn't really know any novelists, but I would bump into film and TV people all over the place, right? And
Huh.
just, I mean, just socially. And so that just made me think, oh, this is, I'm going to pursue this path. It wasn't so much strategic as that's where I perceived there to be a door that was open.
Mhm.
That that in hindsight was probably really foolish, but you know, you don't know what you don't know, right? And
Yeah.
so then I sort of began writing screenplays in Vancouver. Quickly discovered that there is actually no market for screenplays in Vancouver. That, you know, if you work on set, it was an excellent place to work at the time. There was about 30 TV shows going at any given moment, but it wasn't, you know, they were all being written out of Los Angeles. And so at some point I had met a friend traveling who had sold a company and retired and wanted to do something, you know, with his life. And I was thinking to myself, well, I'm never going to get this stuff off the ground unless I produce it. Like just being a writer in film was never going to get me anywhere. And so I invited him to join me in creating a company, and we were together about 2 or 3 months, and then said we need to move to Los Angeles. So we
Mhm.
did. That was 2004. So
Hmm.
that was my you know, I very quickly jumped from I'm going to write screenplays to I'm going to start a company to I'm going to take this company and go to Los Angeles, knowing literally one person in Los Angeles. But that guy, like one person was enough. He made one introduction, and that got me a manager. And that manager sold my first couple of scripts, and then, you know, from there things just sort of unfolded.
That's
Did those
wild.
scripts ever become projects, or did they get lost in a vault like so
The
many stories I've
first
heard?
first two that I sold have never been made, much to my dismay. One of them, in fact, it's a it's a side story, but it was a TV pilot, and I knew nothing about television. I mean, I knew a little bit about film because I knew people that made films, so I would go on set, or people would, you know, sort of, you know, I buy them dinner, and they would kind of explain things to you, which is, by the way, a really good way to start learning the business in any
Mhm.
business, really, but especially in entertainment. Buy people drinks, ask them questions. Really good way to go. But it, uh, I wrote a TV pilot, and ironically, this is 2002 probably now. It was about a bunch of people that get locked down in a pandemic and sort of basically slowly go crazy. And so, in
Hmm.
hindsight, even if that show had been terrible, if it had been made and was available to be sold during COVID, you know, it makes me cry to think of missed opportunity.
Yeah.
We took them to Los Angeles. They got bought. There were bidding wars. It all seemed like, oh, things are going great. And of course, nothing ever got made
Mhm.
from those projects. And that was 2004. And I think the first time I was on a proper film set that I had written was 2010. So 6 years to
Wow.
actually get a completely different project into production.
Wow.
And that's probably fast by Hollywood standards.
I was gonna say that actually sounded fast to me. Hard as that is, you know, but you hear the horror stories of people going to LA in particular and just struggling for a decade or more easily.
Yeah,
on all these
barriers to entry are high for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, I mean, you mentioned the writers, not the writers
strike.
union. Like the strikes and how that impacts. So you're very much beholden to the currents going through the culture there at the same time. So that must be nerve-wracking on a whole other level.
Absolutely. And there are so many things that can get in the way of a project like that. I think, it's interesting when you think about film and then writing novels and then writing video games. Each one kind of has its pluses and minuses. One of them about self-publishing a novel is you can just do it, right?
Yeah.
It may not find an audience. It may not be huge. Maybe it is huge, but you have 100% control of that process if you want to. Whereas, I've worked on maybe 5 huge video games that would have been real feathers in my cap, and some of them were really great projects that never got released. So they got halfway done and the studio just decided for various business reasons they were pulling the plug. And I probably worked on, I'd probably been paid to write 20 film scripts, more or less, somewhere in that neighborhood. And I've produced 3 that I wrote and 2 other ones that I didn't write. So 3 out of 20 is actually, again, not a terrible average for Hollywood, but it shows you, you could spend a decade of your life working on things that you really care passionately about, and they never see the light of day, so, which is sort of soul crushing, even if you're making a living at it.
Yeah. That's hard. That takes a whole other level of, is gumption the right word? Because
patience, like extreme patience.
Yeah, extreme patience. I mean, it makes me think of traditional publishing, and you see people querying for years before they ever see one of their books get through. Kind of the same thing there, And I mean, so it comes with its advantages for sure, and it means you have a team backing you as opposed to flying completely solo. But then on the other hand, you can get things done a lot quicker. You shouldn't always, but you can do things quicker as a self-published author, and you have that control. So a lot of trade-offs and a lot of risks you're taking either way on either path, but things to keep in mind if you want to go into film or video games or publishing novels.
I honestly think these days people, like, if you were to ask me advice to give to, say, someone that just graduated from creative writing school or from whatever, but wanted to be a writer, it's don't just pick one path. Like that, for me, that was the story is put as many irons in the fire as you can, because you just have no idea what will catch, what won't. Some of the best scripts I think I wrote have never been made. And some of the ones that did get made were a little bit of a kind of, oh, really, that's the one we're going to do. But they made, right? So you can't say no. And the same with video games. I think the best video game writing I ever did has mostly never seen the light of day, and probably never will, with the exception of some of the work I did on Sleeping Dogs 2, which got leaked. So it did see the light of day, but then there was a lot of sort of blowback on that. Fortunately, it wasn't me that leaked it, or we left it. That's going to be our next question or something.
Right? Yeah.
But I got some pretty hostile emails from people who were trying to figure out where it had come from, because it was me that had written it. So
wow, yeah, that's a lot to handle. But I mean, very cool to be part of a project like that. Okay, so on this relates to both production and writing, I'm sure. So for film, but video games too. How do you? One of the big differences I immediately think of is you're not doing this on your own. You are working with entire teams and teams of teams on these projects. How does that impact writing? And I'd be curious how that impacts with your experience with film and video game writing.
You're absolutely correct. It really depends on the project. So it depends on the medium, and then it depends on the project inside the medium. So as a general rule on video games, you're very much taking your marching orders from other people. There's usually a creative director who is in charge of the creative vision. So it's not like where you're the script writer and at the beginning, the genesis is you. You get hired hopefully somewhere early in the process, so the thing hasn't, the concrete hasn't set on the basic foundation yet, but
Yeah.
you're coming in at some point and someone else is saying, this is what I want you to do. And then you're trying to find the best way to execute that. And it's not unusual in video games for the train to be pretty far down the track, and either they discover the writers they have they don't like, or somebody leaves for some reason, or this used to be very common. It's less common now, where they didn't really have a writer. Like maybe they had a couple people that have been on the last game that wanted to be writers, and they got a long way down the road before they suddenly went, this writing isn't very good, we need to bring somebody in, and then I was one of the people that you would call for that. I still am. But now you're really kind of working, like, the characters and the progression of the characters and the arc of the story is all sort of set, and maybe not set all that well. And so now it's like, okay, what can we, how do we make lemonade, right? As opposed to a novel where it's, it's all you. Like, you can create it, you can get halfway through and decide, like, oh no, this isn't working, I'm going to throw the whole person out and write it in first person. In video games, that would be $100 million decision, whereas for a novel, it's just like, I wasted 3 months, but it's just me crying in my beer, right? So and film is sort of somewhere in between. Often you are the very first creator on the project. If it's an adaptation, which these days almost everything is, then you're working from whatever the original source IP is, but you get to really put your stamp on it. But then there's a whole host of financial considerations, especially most of the movies that I wrote and produced were sort of $10 million and under. Maybe because of inflation now, they might be $20 million movies, but at the lower end of the Hollywood spectrum. So you're all, you're really constrained by what you can afford to do. The sort of like, and then an army of 1 million guys comes over the hill is just not going to happen in a movie like that. So you're working with, and I did zombie movies, and the art of it was like, okay, what do I do when I can't afford to fill the street with zombies, right? That's like, I would be asking myself that question all the time, and especially because I was the producer. So if I did the jerk writer thing and just be like, I'm just going to write this and let them figure it out later, I was just kicking the can to myself, So that didn't really help me very much. Although being both, I could also go home. Like, I could sit in the office, realize we had a problem, go home at night and fix it by writing around it, right? As opposed to having multiple people that would be in that chain, and maybe you didn't explain yourself very well to them, or they didn't, it could be both the creative side of it. Here's the creative solution I need, but also the producer side of it, knowing what will be inexpensive, but also still will look good. So, and a lot of that goes to all sorts of things you wouldn't think a writer has to worry about, like what sets do we have available, and what days do we have available, and is this at night or during the day? And and then if you're filming in British Columbia, if it's at night but it's February, like, that's a miserable experience, right? And so if we're shooting misery, that's great, but if it's a love scene, that's not going to work, right? So it's there's all these things you would never have to think of that actually can dominate the writing process in some respects.
Because of something you said, now I have to ask this question, because it's been an ongoing, especially on social media, there's this ongoing debate about writers for film and TV putting their stamp on what they're adapting, and the controversies around that. Recent shows come to mind, like Witcher and Wheel of Time, which just got canceled. And a lot of the debate falls back on, these darn writers, trying to do their own thing. Did you experience a lot of that, or how do you work around that? How do you I just want to know what that's like from the writer's side. How do you're doing something, you're trying to, work your writer muscle. How do you exercise that creativity while maintaining some sort of faithfulness to what you're adapting?
I think you're on the right track. So I've both written and produced adaptations. So I wrote 2 Dead Rising movies that I also produced. I produced a digital series called Mortal Kombat Legacy, which I didn't write, but so somebody else was the core creative on that, but I was in charge of making it actually happen. And that, that was on a very tight budget. And so that was a real adventure, especially because Mortal Kombat is so kind of over the top, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, at the beginning, we had a script with Goro, who has 4 arms, and you're just like, okay, look, guys,
How do you do
with
that
the
on
budget we have,
location?
a good 4-arm monster isn't going to happen. But and who's doing martial arts? It's not just that
Yeah.
he stands there
Yeah.
looking scary. He's got to like fight with all 4 arms. It's crazy. But so I think what you try to do is say, what's the heart of the thing? What do people love about it? Which is totally subjective. And
Yeah.
then, try to find like what that is and then build the adaptation out of that. But, it's fraught no matter what. And I think, you can look at some of the adaptations that are out there and different things will work for different reasons. So, like I'm a big fan of Andor, but I think the reason it works is because they actually go away from the IP, right? Like tonally, structurally, in terms of the depth of politics, it's not really like any other Star Wars show that I'm aware of, right? So that's sort of
maybe the first 5 minutes of or not first 5 minutes, but the one of those key opening scenes of New Hope. With the exception of Darth Vader choking out the politician dude, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
that exception, yeah, absolutely.
And then on the other hand, you look at something like, well, probably my favorite one of recent years is Fallout, where I think that was a hard needle to thread for them, because on the one hand it's serious, and on the other hand the game is kind of ridiculous in the best possible way. I'm a huge Fallout fan. And they really threaded that needle beautifully. Like they found a way to give characters heart, to make it really engaging. They capture, the absurdity of it all. And they've added in things. I mean, the Ghoul character is nowhere in the game. And that's not even, that's completely those writers going, okay, here's the world. What's the story we're going to tell? And how does it sort of, dovetail back into the game world? Like, I wouldn't really say that the story is any of the Fallout stories, but it's sort of emblematic of all of the Fallout stories. So they captured the heart of the thing. And I think sometimes when adaptations go astray, they are closer to the literal story, but further from the heart of it. And then also, you're never going to please everyone, right? So everyone loves, they love games for different reasons. So, and sometimes when you're making a project, you don't know why people are going to love it, right? Like Sleeping Dogs, one of the biggest video games I worked on, I wouldn't have thought it would have had fans for the reason it did, but it, like there were certain things we were trying to do, and then certain other things. It's like, well, okay, look, we're going to have a story that's as good as humanly possible, but we're not selling it as a story game. And I think it really caught fire and retains its sort of audience today, even 15 years later, because of the characters and story. And that's
has to feel good as the writer, right?
For sure. I'm still friends with many, many people on that team, and every once in a while we go for beer, and I'll be like, hey, look on Reddit, they're talking about this story,
That's awesome.
Is it really 15 years old?
2010, I think. Might have been 2011. It's all sort of a blur.
I was playing it the other day. It did not feel 15 years old. It's very fun.
Oh,
I think I
just
fun
saw to crack heads and run around and steal cars.
Yeah,
I just saw a meme today, and it showed what you think Final Fantasy looked like 20 years ago, and it showed like one of the originals, like pixelated, and then it showed what it actually was 20 years ago, which is 2005, and it showed, I forget which one that was, but the graphics look not that far off from the ones coming out these days. So you realize, wow, okay, time is flying by. We're not, I mean, I shouldn't be saying this to you, but you got more than a few years on me, but like we're getting old. We're not getting any younger. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's scary to think of things that I did or worked on, like I still play board games with a guy who was the managing editor of Computer Gaming World, which was the big print magazine when video games first started. And so we're talking like the 1990s, late 80s, early 90s. And I was one of his writers. And that was my first writing gig in gaming, was actually as a journalist.
Oh, wow.
So we're still friends today. But we're like, oh, we met in 1990, man. Like, that's a long time ago.
Oh, that's wild. Yeah.
What was the first game you worked on?
As a writer, the first two sort of happened simultaneously, and they were both like desperation repair jobs. So one was a game called Mod Nation Racer, which was Sony's attempt to counter Mario Kart. And
Okay.
I also worked, ironically, on Need for Speed, pretty much at exactly the same time. So two driving games,
Wow.
neither of which were super narrative heavy, but they were both these things where, you know, like on Mod Nation Racer, which was the same company that made Sleeping Dogs. So that's
Mm.
how I ended up working
Okay.
on Sleeping Dogs. Was someone phoned me, they knew me from somewhere, and they said, look, we have all these tutorials and the game is about to ship, and the ratings board, it has to be an E for everyone game because it's a Mario Kart, right? It's
Yeah.
meant for all ages. Has whatever, has said that the tutorials are too kind of crude, so we need to rewrite all the jokes like over the weekend, right? They need to be done on Monday, and you can't change like at certain like little animated characters walk across the screen, and if he's on for 2 seconds, the replacement line needs to be 2 seconds long, right? Because we can't change any of that other stuff.
Yeah.
So that was my very first game writing job, was coming in and like watching the thing and then write it, and then we read it out, and it's a little too long. Okay, well, let's try a different joke, and you know, but
That's crazy.
That's
yeah,
wild.
it's fun.
Yeah, that's absolutely wild. Oh man. Yeah, and the company, was that an offshoot of, or was it Square Enix? Is that right?
Square Enix was the publisher of Sleeping Dogs. The
Okay.
company was called United Front Games. They were based in Vancouver. They subsequently closed, sadly, but that's sort of a symptom of the changes in the game market over the years. But they were a mainstay here for a good decade, I would say.
Wow. That's awesome. I mean, yeah, clearly if they did, the older game you mentioned and then Sleeping Dog, which is still incredible. Yeah. Because I mean that game, yeah,
So,
anyways, Isaac is
for-
trying to convince me to get started on it because it sounds pretty good.
It's fun. It's real good. It's real good. So for Sleeping Dogs, were you there at its inception, or were you brought in later? Like, at what point did you get your fingers into it?
Sure. So yeah, that's an interesting story as well. I'd worked with them on another game, and then I had sort of been in and out helping people with things, and we became friends. And then I went away to make a movie, and Sleeping Dogs was underway, but they really wanted a writer from Hong Kong, right, for authenticity reasons, right? The game obviously set in Hong Kong. It's a gangster movie. That the Hong Kong gangster movie culture is a specific thing, and my wife is Chinese and ethnically from Hong Kong, although she was born in England. So we have, those are I have, I don't know, like 50 fraternal uncles and, dozens and dozens of fraternal cousins. And so I was sort of putting the word out, trying to find someone, but I couldn't find a writer for them for the longest time. And in the meantime, I made a movie. And at the same time, they were being financed by Activision, and Activision pulled the plug. Another one of these crazy game stories. So the game was like 3/4 done. Activision decided they didn't like it, or they didn't want to keep spending the money, or whatever their decision-making process was. So they pulled the plug. And often when that happens, the game developer will go around all the other publishers, hoping against hope that they can find someone who will kind of come in as a white knight at the last minute. And it almost never works. But in this case, it did work. And so Square Enix came on board and said, okay, you've gotten it 90% or 80% of the way home. We're going to give you one more year to work on it. Here are the changes we want. There was all sorts of things, and here's how much money you're going to have, which was still a large sum of money, right? Go. And at that point, they had, one of the problems was they hadn't liked the story, and the writing that had been done was not didn't fit with their vision of the game. And I had just come off of writing and producing a movie, and we were editing, but I was sort of looking around for something to do. And they're like, okay, look, we need someone to start tomorrow. So we just need a writer. We can't start from scratch because there's a whole bunch of things that have been done that we can't redo. Yeah. But we want like a really big revision to it. And so I came in at the beginning of that process and stayed throughout the final development of the game, which was about a year, maybe a little more. And rewrote virtually everything it was possible to rewrite. So the core story of the game was not mine. I mean, it's obviously strongly influenced by by Infernal Affairs, and then The Departed is the American remake of that. But the Hong Kong, I think it's a trilogy, was the sort of starting point for that story. And the characters were there. All the character art was there. You couldn't say, I want this guy to look different. Like that ship had sailed years ago. Or the action had to be different, because you were living with whatever action was already cooked into the game. But I pretty much rewrote everything.
Wow.
So when you say you rewrote everything, you mean dialogue? Do you mean major plot elements? Like what are you rewriting in that sense?
Well, so yeah, almost all of the dialogue, although there were a few actors who were they had a bunch of celebrity actors, and some were simply too expensive to rewrite. So Emma Stone, there was no way. Maggie Q Maggie Q wanted to do it for $10,000 a day, and we just didn't really feel like that was worth it. But Will Young Lee, who played Wei, redid almost all of his lines.
Wow.
So he was available to us, so I could rewrite anything that Wei said. And Jackie was, I'm trying to think of the Hong Kong actor's name, was a really nice guy. But anyway, he was available as well. So the two main characters were there so we could redo it. And some parts of the plot changed a lot. Not the big, like he's an undercover cop. He goes into the triads. His loyalties become conflicted. Various very large anchor points, which I won't give away to spoil the game, but those weren't going to change. But whole things got scrapped, and a few missions in there. I think one of the things I'm most proud of is that the story that was originally the mission is not in any way what the final product was. So with all the same animation, we basically rebuilt them as a way to give that character sort of a better relationship with other characters, so that when they died, we cared about them. For instance, was something that was, one of the pillars of that game was that even the gangsters, if you liked them, then when they were at risk, you would care if they died or not, right? And so I did a lot of work on that sort of aspect of it, of making characters engaging, but at the same time, they're still gangsters, right? Or gangsters' wives, or in one case, a gangster's mom is a pretty central character, right? So yeah, a lot of that got done. And then I actually did bring in a fraternal nephew who had just moved to Vancouver from Hong Kong. And before that, he lived in mainland China. He was like 17, I think. And he was obsessive about Hong Kong gangster movies, and he knew all of the slang. And so we had him write all of the swear words and all of the like Cantonese. There's a lot of insults baked into the way you even refer to like people you're not trying to insult, right? So it's just the nicknames they give are quite to us very insulting, but that's just the nickname that you give someone. But he gave us all the authenticity, and we went and re-recorded all of that, with the promise that we would never ever show his mom the game, because that get him in serious. And apparently I don't speak Cantonese, right? So I was just trusting that he knew what he was the most authentic person we had. But I did have people that played the game later, friends of mine that live in Singapore. They're like, "Oh, I'm surprised you got some of this language past their ratings for it." And I'm like, I don't think any of them speak Cantonese either.
That's so good. The things you sneak in. Oh, that's fun. Yeah, that's oh my gosh, that's tough. Sorry, I'll let you guys.
I haven't read any of your stuff, but I get the feeling it's more on the comedic side.
The novels, yes. My fiction is, I'm calling it cozy stabby. So it's sort of like it's funny, it's heartfelt. The tone is very light, but then the topics are very serious. That's the blend I'm going for anyway, for sure.
So I've known you mostly for the intrigue and the violence of the gangster world. So what is it that draws you to the funny comedy world? Is this another hat you put on, or what drew you to that?
I mean, a lot of my writing over the years, including the screenplays, always had some comedy in them or some humor. I mean, I think even, most of the movies I made were horror movies, right? But you have to have some humor to sort of to juxtapose the tension, and you've got to give people a chance to kind of catch their breath, and have an emotional release. And then the part of it was just accidental. So the impetus for me to finally, like attempt to write novels or to finish a novel, right? Because I'd been noodling around with them for ages, was during COVID. I played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons because, of course, we're all locked down and you could play online all of a sudden. So I had this group that theoretically met once a month, but really met once every 4 months. And so we had a game that was going nowhere. But then all of a sudden now we could play every Tuesday online, and it really flowed. And so pretty soon I had 2 different groups. One was actually a whole bunch of actors and film people, and the other was my friends from Vancouver. And we played a ton of D&D. And I started to see some like trends in the way that people were relating. And I started to put that in, we're relating to characters in the game. And I started to put that into my character. So my character be like, maybe we don't need to murder everyone, right? Like, but maybe we should kind of see the other guy's point of view a little bit. And then I just took that idea and kind of imported it into the books that I wrote. And so they just came off funny. Like I didn't sort of have a strategic idea. It was just like, I'm going to write a story from the point of view of the guy who's managing the dungeon. And, he's trying to have a good life. He's trying to be a decent person. He'd like to fall in love. He's got a relation, he's got a father figure. He's got a sort of difficult but heartfelt relationship with. And, he would manage all of this if it wasn't for these lunatic heroes that keep showing up at this door trying to kill everybody. So I'm going to try. I've got the sun, as the sun moves around the horizon.
I've been seeing it just slowly creep out of your face.
I just realized, because I'm looking at the camera, not down at the screen. It's like, oh, okay. I'm starting to look like an informant or something.
The curse of light direction. Yeah. That's so funny.
So it just, it almost happened by accident. And then once I found his voice in the first book, I just really liked it. And so the second voice, or the second book, is a different character, but I found that tone worked really well for me. So I just have kind of kept going with it, which doesn't mean I wouldn't one day try something different. I mean, I can't imagine going full grimdark, as much as I like to read those books sometimes. I don't think I'd want to live in it 24/7 for 9 months or however long it would take me to finish a novel. But I do enjoy reading them, but I like things that have a balance. So that's sort of just my taste as a reader as much as anything.
Well, when you were describing just making players care about the characters throughout, I immediately thought I'm not saying it's easier. It's just my mind goes towards those grittier elements of life, or the challenges, the things that humanize someone in our eyes as we're reading a story or experiencing a story on film or in a game. So when it comes to something more lighthearted or comedic, like what are the different challenges that play into that? That how do you make someone care about your characters in a far more lighthearted story? If I'm describing your stories accurately, and we'll get into those in a second. Let's
sure.
Yeah.
I think for me, it always starts with character, and it always starts, I mean, the cheat for me is picking someone who's so far down that we can't help but cheer for them as they rise, because they're really starting at as low a place as possible. And then giving them an engaging voice that people can kind of relate to, like a lot of great comic characters, they succeed in the end, but they're always getting smacked in the nose, right? And that's half the fun, is that just when they think they've got it figured out, like some other catastrophe befalls them. Because I'm writing in fantasy, and then fantasy that is sort of self-referentially making fun of Dungeons and Dragons, it's so the first character, the main character of Major Domo is the Major Domo, right? He's the butler, the head butler. So it's of a dungeon. So he's not even the most he's not a powerful necromancer or anything. He's just the guy that hires the staff and makes sure there's enough food there, but he cares for everyone, right? I mean, you could think of it almost like sort of a Downton Abbey type story, where the head butler is kind of, he's not the Lord, right? But he's responsible for everything working, and he takes a lot of pride in that, right? He's invested himself in that. But in this case, he's a kobold, and then he's a kobold with a club foot. And, the joke there is that in all the D&D campaigns I've played, and especially in Baldur's Gate, the original, the kobolds always run away. Like that's, the minute they see you, they turn and run. And so he can't run. So he's had to find some other path in life, just because the cards he was dealt at birth. And then this in Jester, the first full-length novel, the character is a goblin who's been enslaved. And not only has he been enslaved, but the job he's been assigned is to clean the toilets in the castle. So he's like literally the very, very, very bottom of the social strata in this place. But it allows him to come and go from various rooms and to observe things. And he's clearly smart. And he sees that he's heard the rumors that there's this massive undead army somewhere in the distance that is eventually going to show up. And as he watches the lords and the counselors and the other people in power, he realizes they're a bunch of corrupt morons, and that these clowns will never save the castle, right? Like, left to their own devices, for sure they're going to end up backstabbing each other until the day they all die. And the problem is he's going to die too. So in order to not be eaten alive by the undead, he's got to manufacture change from a position of complete weakness. And so, with starting, if you put someone in that position, that's sort of, to me anyway, naturally funny. And then I gave him the sort of natural insecurity that would come if you were a teenager and you got bashed on the head and taken away and made a slave that cleans people whom you think are stupid's toilets. You're going to have a major inferiority complex. And if you're going to manipulate power behind the scenes in a very high risk, high stakes game, you're going to need to overcome that, right? Like, at some point, you're going to need the confidence to make things happen. And so that's his kind of journey. And on the one hand, it's existential and it's sort of very heartfelt, but at the same time, it's kind of silly, right? Like, everyone in the castle are morons. And then he slowly starts to discover people who are not stupid, and he makes friends. And he has, by the end of the story, he has a sort of network of people that he's working with. And it could almost be understood as like a spy story, right? Like, they're all sort of covertly manipulating politics behind the scenes. My background, if you go back far enough, is in political science. And so I'm always thinking about strategy and about politics as a way of rooting a story. So those are the first two books that I did. And the third one, just very quickly, is about a familiar. If you played D&D, it's a familiar who's sick of being sent on suicide missions. And she's just like, I need to change the way that my world is structured because my life is awful. I keep getting sent around the corner to be squashed by a monster. And that's no way to go through life.
I need to, I should pull up the, I don't know, just how Restream works with my browser. I'm not going to risk it, but I want to pull up the descriptions for both. I'm going to switch to Majordomo for a second here. But for both of them, just the fact that you keep calling them morons. Most authors hate the task of putting together their blurb for the book. It's a lot of authors call it the most difficult part. Your blurbs are awesome. They immediately sell the book, and I don't know why, but for me, it's the fact that idiots appears in both. It works for me. So the moment you call all these political uppity ups idiots, and your main character is juxtaposed against them, I'm like, oh, I'm in. And that's the point. That's the character development right away, sucking you in. But also the snarkiness of just blatantly calling them idiots right off the bat. It tells you exactly what you're getting into. I love that.
Oh, thanks. I agree. Blurbs are a nightmare. And my process is to do the best I can, which is usually terrible. And then there's various places on Reddit where self-published authors can kind of post blurbs and get advice. And then there's a couple of other Discord servers that I go to. And I just shamelessly put it out there and say, look, I know that it will get there eventually, but it's bad now. What do people think? And I've gotten some awesome advice that way. And usually it's me taking their advice and then kind of making it my own and then putting it back up. It takes 2 or 3 goes around to get the blurbs where I like them, but it's absolutely a kind of community feedback process. I would never get them there on my own. Like they would still be the crappy version at the beginning. So yeah. All credit to the self-pub and fantasy writers, I think, on Reddit, and I can't remember what the Discord group is at the moment, but it's Indie Authors Ascending. That's what it is.
Okay,
they have a really good blurb feedback sort of.
That's program. The Discord one. That's Indie
Discord.
Authors Ascending. Okay.
people there are lovely, and they by and large give really, really useful advice.
Because yeah, that's a big one. Getting your blurb right is tough, and yeah, I sent it out to a lot of people when I was doing mine and got feedback, because otherwise, and I realized very quickly I know nothing about this, and all the help I was finding online was just contradictory. So you have to actually talk to people. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So,
100%.
oh, sorry. I was going
No,
to say,
great.
JA has a great question here, and we'll get to talk about specifically the 2 books you have out now. But if you had to pick between them, which would you have adopted as a video game or movie?
Well, they would have to be animated. So as movies
Mm,
go, unless we have Lord of the Rings type budgets, but and in fact, now when I think about it, it's Lord of the Rings is probably small by comparison to the big blockbusters today. But Major Domo would make a great game. I mean, there was a game called Dungeon Keeper many, many years ago that essentially you were the manager of a dungeon, and I played that a fair bit, and it also was kind of silly, and had a lot of fun with the idea. And so I definitely think Major Domo could be made into a sort of updated version of Dungeon Keeper. Maybe there's something out there now, but I'm not aware of it. And then I think Jester would be better suited as a movie. And boy, I would love to do that one day.
Jester sounded like a really fun little Pixar pitch.
Get them both on the screen really quick, but yeah.
Yeah, boy.
In a realm run by, see, there it is right there, right on the cover too. In a realm run by idiots, their only hope is the fool. I love it. Like immediately. That's a great tagline. Even just reducing your book to a really good tagline, that's a whole other level of difficulty. But if you could do it well, because people will remember it. This is a very memorable tagline. Immediately stood out to me.
Thanks. Yeah, no, and I agree with you completely. And again, it is the product of community kind of feedback. I mean, I did have an idea for that originally, and I knew that I wanted to tie the title Jester into the story. So like, what is this about? But that went through all sorts of iterations, and I got a lot of feedback from just like people I don't even know who just took the time to give me their thoughts. It was it's one of the great things about the indie sort of writing community is people are really generous.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is why it pays quite literally to put yourself out there, and because I think before, I think for a lot of us it tends to be before you publish, but it's also an open community. Tends to be after you publish that most authors I know really start finding that community, but it's incredibly open even beforehand, and it pays to start putting yourself out there on social media just to meet people who are in the same space as you, whether they're still writing or they are published. And it's amazing how many people will just answer your questions if you ask. So reaching out to someone who's already published, a published indie author, I got so much good advice just because I asked a question. Someone said, "Oh yeah, here you go," and they dump all their experience on you, and you realize, oh my gosh, not a lot of industries will give you that level of immediate access to people who are genuinely interested in helping you out.
I think that's absolutely true. It's I mean, having worked in film, TV, video games, and publishing, you do occasionally you can find a mentor figure or someone who's really generous in film and will take the time to I regret meeting you.
He's talking to me. Let's clarify that.
Oh, okay. That's the problem when everyone is named Tim.
Which Tim do we blame today?
Yeah. But I think that, the amount of sort of collaboration and sharing and generosity in the indie author space, and even in the traditionally published space. I mean, I will shamelessly email anyone. I think that's one thing you learn 20, 30 years in this is it never hurts to ask. And I've met some traditionally published authors who also gave me a ton of time and a ton of advice and are really nice and supportive. And, sometimes it's just the emotional support, right? Like, keep going, you're doing good. Like that kind of thing is invaluable. And they don't need to do that. Right. So it's really been remarkable. And it's something that's really noticeable, I think, across the whole sort of publishing world, I think.
Yeah. Well, so let's talk a bit more about the books, because I think for a while, you were appearing everywhere because of Major Domo winning Sphinx. So let's talk a little bit about that. And then, I mean, Jester just came out in April, right? Do I have
Yep.
that right? Mid-April,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So those are both very recent developments, and awesome right there. So I mean, yeah, this is huge. Too. I think you said this. You wrote a bit quicker too, and submitted it to a competition like Sphinx, and to your credit, blowing the competition out of the water and rising to the top. That's incredible.
Yeah, thanks. And I read a bunch of the finalist novellas, and they were awesome. So I was really, I mean, it was sort of doubly thrilled, right? I went in with no expectations, but then also like every time I read someone's, I'm like, "Ooh, this is good," and
Mm,
I'd be like, "Oh, that made me feel even better," right? And
no.
so, uh, but it was an indie author, but I cannot for the life of me tell you who it was. But somebody told me you should enter this contest.
Mm,
And because I never would have thought of it on my own, and I just put it in there thinking, well, why not, right? Throw my hat in the ring and see what happens, and it really found a great response. I was deeply flattered and just really pleased that it kind of worked for people.
yeah. I mean, what a way to enter. To this is the first actual novel or novella you ever put out, right?
Yes,
So
yeah,
that what an experience to have your first time around. That's it's about as good as
yeah,
it gets.
phenomenal. It's probably set the bar up here that I'll never get to again, but
Yeah. Well, I mean, well, okay. No, I was gonna say Spiffbo coming up for fantasy, but no, that's gonna be next year because they're doing
January, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So when I heard that, I was a little disappointed, I have to admit, but like a lot of us. But it is cool to see the first 10 winners go up against each other. So I'm excited to see how that turns out. But a little part of me is like, I was ready.
I'm in exactly the same boat. Like Jester had just come out. Not that again, I had no strategy or systematic plan, but I did sort of start to look at what the deadlines were, and then I just was, oh, they're going to do the top 10. Not that I mean that's an entirely worthy thing to do for sure, but
Yeah. But no, exactly. It used to be in May, right? Was when
mhm.
Spiffbo would, yeah. So everyone was kind of gearing up, and then slowly realized, oh no, 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 it's not happening this time around.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
anyways, yeah, it all works out. Yeah. So I mean, well, since this is the most recent one, and it's such a different medium, or not different medium, but different length, which comes with a lot of different challenges. Yeah, tell us a bit more about Jester and how that's gone so far after the launch.
sure. So as I said before, it's the story of a goblin slave who is fighting his own sense of self-worth and attempting to manipulate the politics of this very poorly run little duchy that is in the path of a massive sort of seemingly undefeatable army. And it needs really good leadership to have any kind of chance at all, and it in fact has catastrophically bad leadership. So it's sort of a comic journey of both him finding himself, but also finding a network of friends and allies, and discovering like almost what that means, right? Like at one point he realizes that this person who he perceives to be much more powerful than him needs his friendship, and and values his friendship just for his friendship. It's not a transactional thing, right? Where
Mm,
he's used to everything around him being very transactional. And so it's that journey toward trying to make it so the idiots don't win in the end. Again, I like the phrase cozy stabby. Someone used it in a review really early on in Major Domo, and I just thought, oh, I'm glomming onto that and hanging on for dear life. But it's that combination of, again, a lot of snark, a lot of sort of observational satire, a
mm.
certain amount of fun with Dungeons and Dragons for sure, and with bending tropes as much as humanly possible. But at the same time, hopefully people are along for the ride with the main character and really rooting for his success. So,
Mm.
uh, and
Is it a is it
sorry,
a standalone? In that
yes,
okay, yeah, yeah.
it's it's a standalone. Although I do think there's the possibility, like actually in both Major Domo and Jester, you know, there's more story runway there, but it comes
Mm,
to a complete conclusion. I never. It's one of my bugaboos. Even a well written book, if it doesn't have an end, I feel like the first Law trilogy. drives me crazy because it,
Yeah, is Mike Molman still in here? He'll join you in complaining about that any day.
yeah. I mean, they're beautifully written. I love the books, but like books 1 and 2 don't have an ending, like,
Yeah.
and I think you need that, even if you're going on to other things. So, I've sort of given myself a way out for each of those books to go somewhere else. But I hope that they have a really satisfying ending where the problem that you, like me as an author, said at the beginning, hey, this is a book about a guy trying to overcome this problem. And then that problem gets solved, even if, maybe his life has a lot more to work with.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. You can have open loops, but you have to have some sort of satisfaction at the end of a story, or some sort of resolution, or some sort of sense that, okay, you don't want to, yeah. I mean, I've read a lot of cliffhangers I enjoy, but pulling those off well really does require still some semblance of satisfaction, even if you're still waiting for what comes next. Otherwise, why did I experience this? And you're going to put me on the line for another 2 to 5 years while you write the next one? Come on.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I agree completely. And I think, a really good starting rule for all writers is write the things you like to read. And so if something bugs you when you're reading it, don't put it in your books,
Yeah.
So I think I try to live by that whenever possible.
How do you navigate, because then the opposite immediately comes to mind to me is sometimes everyone, you kind of hinted at it before, you can't please everybody, but everyone has their own pet peeves, and that can be the really tricky part to navigate. So when you were putting both of these together, what did you do for I mean, there's editing on the one hand, and then there's beta feedback too. What kind of process did you have for refining these before the final publication, so you weren't just navigating it on your own whims, if you know what I mean?
Sure. Well, so having been inspired by my Dungeons and Dragons groups, they were my first alpha readers, right? Because they really knew where the stories were coming from, and so that was just non-writers who were giving feedback. And then on Major Domo, because I was really unsure of whether it was any good, I hired a developmental editor who was also a kind of copy editor and proofreader. Rooted in Writing is the name of the company, and they're great. I really like them. They're based in Austin. So they gave me a developmental pass and did make some suggestions, but they essentially said, we think this is really good. So they improved it, but it was really just changes around the margin. And they gave me the confidence for Jester to not go there with a professional editor. I just went with kind of my ideal readers. And when enough of them got it, so I had the Major Domo had, sort of 5 to 8 alpha readers, right? Several of whom read it very carefully, and others, I think, just sort of blew through it. And then, so Jester had a much bigger group, and it was sort of divided into, maybe 20 sort of hardcore beta reader types who were somehow on my mailing list, or I had met them somehow, or maybe they had come into Major Domo later or something. And then, a wider group as a second pass. And when enough people were responding the right way, it was like, okay, you're never going to please everyone, but it was almost like a confidence thing. Like now I feel good enough with the decisions I've made, right? To put it out there in the world. So, and then it went through proper editing. I mean, that's for self-publishing. I use a company called Miblart for the covers. So they're quite reasonably priced. So the the overwhelming majority of the money I spend on it is on editing. And that, which I think I read that somewhere in a how-to guide, but I think that's really a good way to go.
Yeah, it adds up quick, but it's definitely worth it.
Oh yeah, it's a gut check when you see the quote, but I do think it's worth it, and I have received quite a few compliments about the sort of technical editing of it, not so, and the lack of typos. Although I will say, even with a professional editor and then a professional proofreader, and I've gone over it, who knows how many times, and then the ARC readers who were reading it just to get reviews on Goodreads, some of them are really diligent with calling out typos, but boy, they caught a lot. That was almost like
slips through. I mean, even in trad publishing as well. So this isn't just an indie thing, and that's the point. Genuinely, really professional editors will miss plenty because it's you're just stacking layers of human effort to catch as much as you can. And there is a
Absolutely.
point where you just have to put it out, and as feedback comes in, another perk of being indie is you can make those tweaks really easily.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
yeah.
What were some of your influences for Major Domo and Jester,
Well,
other than
so
the Dungeons and Dragons?
I think it all goes back to Terry Pratchett, no matter what you do. If you're
Mhm.
writing humorous fantasy and you're not inspired by him, there's something strange going on. So I took, especially from him, the idea that the story has an end and that you could create this world. And I hope that I'll have a whole bunch of books that live in this world. It's not as distinctive as his in the sense that,
Mhm.
he's got a disc on the back of a floating tortoise or whatever the Discworld is. But it's not quite that bananas, but they all take place in the same universe. So you approach that universe with the same tone. And then more sort of contemporary writers, I'm a huge fan of Nicholas Eames, who was nice enough to blurb the front of Major Domo after it came out. So Kings of the Wild, which is really gave me the confidence that, you can take a classic D&D story, like the party, goes on a journey and still have fun with it and make fun of the tropes, but stay true to this sort of essential, we really want to know how the hero solves the problem in the end kind of story. And then, there's Sebastian de Castell is, I think, and both Nick Eames and Sebastian live in Vancouver, or Nick lives in Victoria and Sebastian de Castell lives in Vancouver. So even though I've never met Sebastian de Castell, there's something inspiring about the proximity there in a weird sort of way. I think J. Zachary Pike, who won Spiffbo, somewhere in the middle of the thing there. So the Orconomics series was also, sort of telling it somewhat from the monster's point of view, but just taking that world and putting it on a funny angle and seeing how the story played out when you did that. I thought he did that really well. His books are great, and I had read them just as a fan, right, of indie fantasy, but that was really inspiring to me.
That's awesome.
How am I going to work my light here? I think it's the sun. This
You're
is
just
the problem
becoming
with
more
the
and more
sun going
dramatic
down.
as it goes on.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you're
It's really
Pacific
bad.
time. It's what, about 6 p.m. over there?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. So I shouldn't be as amused as I am by this, but I mean, I get it. I've been my old apartment. It faced the sun, and so late day work meetings. It was always the same thing. I had to close my curtains, or I was just getting blasted by sunlight in the middle of.
When it's the failing of this little office in the woods, there are no curtains.
Yeah.
So I think the next time I'll just put a piece of cardboard over this one window, I think.
Oh, it's so funny.
You ever get creeped out working in there at night?
I don't get creeped out working in here because I had it set up with lights, but this island has very little background light in it. So if you leave the kind of halo created by your house or your office or whatever, you are in pitch darkness. And I would occasionally take my dogs out for a late night pee. And the other thing is this island has about 1 million deer on it. So you're in complete darkness. You've got a tiny little halo of your flashlight, and the deer will be about 8 or 9 feet away, breathing heavily, just checking you out, wondering what you're doing. And that is really weird to hear, kind of like snuffling and snorting and vague rustling sounds somewhere very close by that you can't see. It's right out of a horror movie, or I don't know if you guys ever played Alan Wake, but it's very Alan Wake.
It's amazing.
I love that kind of video game terror is a whole other conversation.
That's
but
not gonna work.
It's funny.
Sorry, excuse me as I move around to try to not be.
It's all good.
No problem. Oh yeah, get Taz in the picture.
There we go.
Taz, that goes all the way back to my childhood, but what can I say?
Awesome.
We're a little over the hour mark. Do you have time for a bit of a game?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes. I think. Are you ready? I think we're ready for a game, eh?
I've been preparing. I've been trying to get this thing ironed out in some way that makes sense. I hope it makes sense.
Well, the fact
It'll be
that D and
good.
D came up so much, I feel like makes this even more fun. So I think it's gonna be fun. We're ready. Let's do this.
Okay, so we're gonna play a little game called Very Awake Dogs, a mini adventure. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna put you, Tim Carter, in a situation, and you gotta get out of it.
All right.
That's all you really need to know. So let me paint a picture for you. So you wake up, you're kind of groggy, you're on the floor of a shabby gas station. You taste the dust in the air as you sit up, and there's a weird taste in your mouth. You look down in your hand, you're holding what I write. You're holding an empty generic white plastic bottle. And it's empty. You don't know what it is. And as you're sitting there kind of getting your bearings, a goblin pops out of the little aisle. And he says, congrats, you've truly surprised me. I've never in 1,000 years thought you would have it in for JFK like that. And he looks at you, he kind of looks at your hand, and he says, did you just drink that? Did you drink that? That's cleaning fluid. That's cleaning. You got to get the poison control. So he kind of points outside and he says, there's a poison control center just down the road there. But before you go, how about some items to help you on your way? He kind of opens his little jacket and he has a couple things for you to choose. You can either take a toilet brush, a can of Altoids, or a rat.
Okay, now I have it in for JFK. I've drunken cleaning fluid, and I've got to get to the poison control. Is that?
That's basically what's happened.
I'm going to take the can of Altoids.
Can of Altoids?
Sure.
Okay. He takes the can, he does a little shake. You hear the Altoids in there, and he hands it over to you. He says, sir? He hands it to you, and he kind of scurries away, and he disappears in like a rat hole.
Okay.
So you go outside the gas station, and outside, you see kind of shambling around in the pumps. You see this guy. Next slide, please, Tim. You see Paulie. Paulie's fresh out of smokes. He's really angry. He's like, "Arr." He's shambling around the gas station pumps. He sees you come out of the gas station. He sees you, and he says, "Ugh. I'm so mad. I didn't expect to die. I'm so mad. I just can I beat you up? I feel so much better if I beat you up."
Well, listen, Paulie, I have sympathy for you. I have all the sympathy in the world. It must suck to die.
It does. It does. There's a
if
lot of
that's-
us, but we have smoke to hide that we can't have very many zombies right now.
Yeah, well, exactly. I have some experience with that. That's a really tough transition, but I got to tell you, you gotta find your inner core. Like beating me up's not going to help you to kind of find yourself in this. You want to look inside and become the best possible undead guy you can. That's the path to true sort of, true fulfillment in this next role. You got to see it as like a new role in life, not an end to something, just a transition.
Okay, Paulie's thinking about like, look inside myself. This is a new path. He does this. He puts his hand in his chest. He like pulls out his heart. He goes, and he dies. He falls over. He's dead. You've killed Paulie. But as he falls, the smoke clears, and you see the street is kind of really busy. Like you said, there's a lot of zombies on it, but they're not as mad as Paulie. They've come to terms with their transition, and they're having a party. And you see there are all these banners, and it's like a little block party. And all these banners say, welcome the dogs, happy dog day, everything about dogs, just all down that block party. And as you're approaching it, you feel a little tug on your shirt sleeve. You look down, it's the goblin again. Next slide, please. The goblin says, hey, that wasn't your fault about Paulie. That wasn't your fault. He wasn't the smartest guy he wasn't very smart. He says, but here's some more things for you to use. He opens up his little jacket. He says, you can either have a giant foam finger, some cool shades, or an egg timer. You never know what you'll need in that crowd.
Okay, so I'm going to go with the cool shades.
Cool.
It would help with the sun, right?
Yeah, I wish.
It would. It would. Yes. So the goblin takes out the cool shades, gives them over to you. He says, here you go. You look pretty sharp with those. And he takes the giant foam finger and the egg timer and he runs off into the crowd. And in the crowd, you notice that amongst the zombies and the other people just partying, there are a lot of dogs, and they're not normal dogs. They're like standing up, they're walking around. One of them sees you. One of them walks over to you. Next slide, please. It's smartly dressed Desmond. Desmond, he looks at you. He says, "Hey, what are you? Are you? Paulie's dead. Did you kill Paulie? Are you riffraff? I'm not letting any riffraff in the party. You can't come in if you're riffraff. Are you riffraff?"
Well, I very coolly slide on my cool shades, nice and slow, like they belong nowhere but on my face. Then I open my can of Altoids, again, very slowly. I could be
Okay.
Bogart taking
You
a
have
cigarette.
Desmond's absolute attention.
Yeah. I could be Bogart taking a cigarette out of a package in Casablanca. I take one Altoid out, close the lid, tap it on the lid, my little ritual, put it in my mouth, say, "I'm not riffraff, friend. Tell me about your party. Is it something I might want to attend?"
He's like, "Oh, yeah, of course you're not riffraff. Of course not riffraff. Yeah, we're the dogs. We're the dogs, man. We come into town. We're the dogs. You haven't heard about the dogs? We're the dogs." He kind of like puts his arms out. He's like, "This is us. We're the dogs." He's like, "You're not looking so good though. You're looking a little pale, even with the shades. Are you feeling okay? What's your deal here?
Now, how do I feel?
How do you tell me how you feel?"
Well, I guess underneath my cool exterior, I'm a little concerned about drinking cleaning fluid. So I think I'll ask Desmond. I'll say, "You are the dogs, man, and there's nothing cooler in the world than dogs." I think everyone knows that on some level, including the one outside my office right now who thinks it's walk time. I'll tell you what. I'm looking for the poison control center. Just to cover my bases.
Gotcha. So Desmond, he thinks real hard. He says, "I'm a dog, so I can't read, but I'm pretty sure that it's right that building out there." He points to a building, and you see really big and proud in purple letters on the side, "Poison Control." He says,
What?
That'll probably do it for you. And Desmond, he kind of
Yes,
he gets distracted with a zombie arm being thrown. He scurries away. So as you're heading toward the poison control, you see the goblin. The goblin's wandering in the crowd again, and he says, "Oh, dude, this party's great. The dogs are great. Look at all this stuff." He's like, "Listen, I've bought too much. You want one of these things? I have a chili dog, I got spicy nachos, and I got some buttered popcorn. I mean, which one should..." He holds them out, and you notice there's something odd about these items. They're a little bit sparkly. They're a little bit iridescent. They look like they might have special things that they do to people when they ingest them. You're not quite sure, though.
I'm gonna go with. I think I'm gonna try the spicy nachos. I think each one of these is going to require me to have a napkin. But of the three, I think I'm going to do best with spicy nachos.
Okay, the goblin hands you the spicy nachos, and he wanders off from the crowd, and he's gone. And you walk in to poison control. Now, when you get in there, it's a little bit strange. It's not like a doctor's office. There's like a little there's a waiting area like a doctor's office, but it's homey and comfortable, and it opens up to this large space where there's people at tables, and there's chefs, and there's people cooking things, and it's not normal poison control. And as you walk in, you notice that there's one guy in the center at one of these tables, and he kind of looks back at you. He sees you come up. Next slide, please. It's Hank Hill.
Get back over here. I think I can do this now.
Hey, there we go.
Hank Hill, he looks at you and he says, now let's see if I can do my Hank Hill impression. He says, "Boy, what are you doing out here? Who are you? What are you doing here? You look all shap. You look like riffraff.
Well, I'm not riffraff, Hank. You know, and I'll again, I'll take an Altoid out of my box. I'll do my cool ritual, just very slowly. You know, no rush, no hurry, no stress. Just taking them in. Let's say,
You
I tell you
definitely
what,
put Hank Hill at ease. He
yeah.
says, you know, I misjudged you when I saw you like that. I shouldn't have reacted that way. But listen, I had spent a lot of money to get this reservation at this here restaurant. I hear they have a fish here that's to die for. Literally, so I know the sign says poison control, but it's pison. It's fish. It's fish, boy. So that's more Foghorn Leghorn. He says, they have a fish here called the reverse pufferfish. They say it cures anything. It's the most non-toxic thing ever. I have bad acid reflux, and I need to eat this pufferfish. It's the last pufferfish they have. So I need to eat this pufferfish to live normal. So I don't know. I don't know what I can do for you, son. If you really are poisoned, I don't think I can help you.
Well, I'll tell you what, Hank. I appreciate that, and I certainly don't want to deprive you of, you know, normalcy. That's, you know, that would be a terrible thing, and I think I can sympathize with that acid reflux problem. It just so happens that I have here some spicy nachos that, despite their sort of apparent spiciness, they have a little bit of extra in there. I don't know if you've ever heard of like what would you call it, like exposure therapy, but these spicy nachos have the power through their spiciness to like actually cure you of not only acid reflux, but any form of indigestion that you might experience from, let's say, not saying you, but just a hypothetical person, if they were to overindulge in, say, snack foods, junk food, hot dogs, burgers, like the spicy nachos, it's almost like a vaccine for snack food. You have
edible vaccine.
You'll never have a problem again.
Hank Hill thinks about that, and the hibachi chef finishes his pufferfish, sits in front of him. He says, "Your pufferfish." He looks at the pufferfish. He looks at the nachos. He's like, "You promised me these nachos are going to cure me of my acid reflux."
I promise you that not only are you never going to have to worry about your acid reflux again, but you will be able to indulge to your heart's desire. It won't bring you back to normal. It will actually bring you to a better place.
Okay. Hank Hill thinks about it and goes, all right, then. I'll trade you my antitoxin pufferfish for the blue nachos.
That seems like a fair
deal. You make the trade, you eat the pufferfish, you immediately feel any poison in your body subside. The pufferfish absorbs it and neutralizes it. Totally. Hank Hill, he looks at his nachos, he gives it a sniff, he goes, well, all right. And he picks one up and he takes a bite, and immediately he starts choking because the nachos, they guarantee to choke anyone who eats it. And Hank Hill, he's having trouble. His face is turning blue, and he's like, oh, I'm having trouble. And he kind of falls down. He hurts himself on the hibachi grill with his hand a little bit. He rolls under the table. All right, what are you gonna do?
I'm gonna say, stay with it, Hank. You gotta take the full exposure to get the full benefit. So I'm gonna get to my knees and give him another nacho just to, you know, like, hang in there, Hank. You just gotta got your way through it. Like the day after you take the vaccine, you know, you feel a little sick. This is just that taken to another level, but you'll get there.
Hank looks at you in the eyes. He says, I trust you, cool shade man. He eats more nachos. He keeps eating them, and he falls down. He becomes a zombie, just like everyone outside. As Hank Hill is metamorphosizing into a zombie, the goblin tugs on your jacket. He says, hey, look, this has been a great adventure. I just want to come clean. That wasn't that was a joke. It was you weren't dying at all. It was literally just it was toilet water I found. It was gross, but you were gonna like die. But yeah, and he sees Hank Hill is dead. He goes, oh, you don't like JFK, don't like Hank Hill. You got something about Texas, don't you? And we'll end our adventure there.
Oh well, come on. There we go.
Poor Hank Hill. I wasn't expecting Hank Hill to die.
Yeah, the time that Tim Carter, killed Frank Hill is not something.
You're being so wholesome through the whole thing too.
That was just, I was hoping they were going to give him something good.
Yeah. Well, I had the little things that all the food did. You picked the one that choked people.
That was good. Yeah, that was. I was not prepared for Poisson Control. That one.
That'd be a great name for a restaurant.
I love
it. Actually, that would be a good name for a restaurant.
That would be a really good name for a restaurant. Oh man, I mean, as long as someone catches on to the French,
Well, being in Canada, we're programmed in for that.
You'd think.
Yeah, it'd do great in Canada, yeah.
It depends on where. Even here in Ottawa, the number of people I know who just don't speak a lick of French. So it depends where you grow up, for sure. Yeah, but
that's fair.
Yeah. That was funny. That was terrible, but it was really funny.
I wasn't prepared for you to ask why the dogs were there. What do you guys do? Like, there was. I wrote down other things. I wasn't prepared for that question though.
That's the true nature of role-playing games, is that the thing you think your players are going to do is not the thing they ever do. And the thing you never thought of, they'll be like, oh yeah, well, let's go over here and whatever. The evil overlord is over there and they're setting up like a coffee shop or something.
Yeah. That's what makes it so fun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Now, have you alternated back and forth between, DMing and just playing, or are you generally the DM, or what's your experience been there?
No, I am generally the player, actually.
Okay.
And that's just a straight up time thing. I would love to do some DMing, but it's just the preparation for it. And I think because, obviously I played it as a kid, and then I played like digital role-playing games, the live long day, but I hadn't really got back into pen and paper until COVID. And because some of my friends were, their jobs had shut down for the pandemic, they had way too much time on their hands, right? Mm-hmm. So they're doing like 30, 40, 50 hours of preparation for the adventure. And it's like, I can't spend that amount of time. 3 hours every Tuesday night was the most that I could manage, but I would love to. I think it teaches you a lot about storytelling and about characters, and I'm sure there's something to be said for just the straight up improv of it all.
Yeah. Yeah. Must make pantsing easier, but and character development, but the improv side, I'm thinking for pantsers is particularly helpful.
I think so. Although, almost every adventure I've been on has gone sideways at some point, which I think would, for me anyway, would be the real risk of being a true pantser. I'd be like, well, okay, I've just written myself into a hole. I have no idea what's going on or how I'm ever getting out of it.
Sure. Well, so there's a bit of a writing question for you that I'm especially curious, since it's such a classic question for novel writers, but coming from actual, industry work where you're constrained by the direction of others. I imagine you're at least very comfortable with writing under stiff plots, but do you plot for your own writing?
I definitely plot. I need to know how it's going to end, and I need to know where I'm trying to get my people to, or I get lost, and I think it gets kind of bad. Like my writing just falls apart. So I really want to have that structure to lean on, but then I think I leave myself open to discover things and to have characters suddenly do something different than I had planned for them to do, or to just discover like whole scenes and elements that I didn't think were in there. And then, all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait a minute. You know what? I think we're going to go sideways here and talk about something else. And sometimes those are the things people love the most.
Yeah.
Ones that were no part of the master plan.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Which must be extra fun in a comedic setting where you can really go off the rails a bit.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and for me, the comedy comes from the voice of the character. So if the
Mm,
character has a certain observational style, that gives them the freedom to riff on whatever, right? Like not just the thing they're in the moment of doing, but to take the thing that they're in the moment of doing and make some other comment about it.
mm.
Like, the gods would never have, the gods must be insane because they, like, none of this would happen in a rational world. And then to go off down that rabbit hole for a little bit, right?
Nice.
Is
Yep.
a fun way to address if you want something truly absurd to happen, to sort of put it into context can be really funny, I find.
Which also has a lot of hidden depth. I mean, you have to have, a lot of depth to have those kind of observations, comedic or otherwise. You have to actually be deeply observing the world around you. Like you said, coming from a poli sci background as a foundation for that, which maybe not everyone would expect, but I definitely see it. Um,
I try to do that, and I also find it's really useful for shorthand and for giving me guidance. Like, so in Jester, there's a big battle scene at the end, and it's I don't know if you guys know too much about history, but like it's Midway meets Agincourt. And
mm,
once I realized, like, okay, how does a small underdog force end up winning against a big force? I don't think that's a surprise that the heroes win in the end. And it's like, okay, well, there's Agincourt, and then here's Midway. That's two classic real life battles where that happened. So I'm going to mash them together, and which is also kind of absurd because one is, bombers off aircraft carriers, and the other is English longbowmen shooting at French knights, right? But
yep.
and then other parts of the story, I'm like, this is kind of the story of Oleg Gordievsky, who was a double agent in England. So he worked for the KGB, but he also worked for MI6. And, which is straight out of my poli sci history. But it gives you a through line and like an anchor point. So I'm not just wandering all over the place. It's like, oh, okay, but obviously, it's goblins and elves and zombies. It doesn't really fit into a KGB story, but the idea of what was happening in real life, it gives you something to hold on to. And so I actually try to do that as often as possible. I find that's a really useful tool. And then because you're talking about real life, the real emotions of the real people, can be taken and sort of adapted into a fantasy setting, but you're hanging on to real emotions, like real things that people really went through, so that it doesn't sort of, sometimes I find fantasy drifts to a point where like the characters aren't acting like real people anymore, even if they're drow or whatever, right? Whereas I think what I like most is when I can see kind of the humanity in everyone, including the bad guys.
Yeah. Well, so on the topic of having read history clearly and studied, I'm curious. So, do you still do a lot of history and poli sci reading, or yes? I mean, we can talk games and film too, but I'm thinking specifically reading. What do you ingest the most of these days? Would it be more other fantasy? Would it be other genres blending together? Would it be that nonfiction? Yeah, I'm just curious. What do you take in these days?
It's a huge mishmash. And I have two dogs here, and so I walk my dogs for an hour in the evening and about 45 minutes in the morning. So I take in a lot of stuff by audiobook and by
Mm,
podcast. That's it's the only way I'm able to onboard as much information as I do. So I always like to be reading at least one fantasy book, because writing in fantasy, I think you can't do that unless you love the genre, but also you're sort of aware of what other people are doing, right?
yeah.
Uh, so I certainly do a lot of that. But then as like just to break things up, I'll read like a detective thriller or a horror story or a literary piece, just to mix things up. And then I do follow a ton of politics. I'm a complete junkie for that. And particularly my background was in sort of national security and strategic planning. And
Mm,
so I read a lot about Ukraine. I follow a lot of people that I admire on various, either you can get some really interesting things on open source intelligence on social media, but then there's also some really good think tank people. And then I still do a little work. Right now I'm consulting for a company called Useful Fiction, which is like a national security consultancy that uses storytelling in that context. And so
wow.
it takes my storytelling and game experience, but I'm actually working with people who are in turn working with the various militaries all across the Western sort of alliance. So I still keep like a tiny little finger in that world.
Okay, we knew you were cool. You don't need to keep. I'm just kidding. That's awesome.
It's a desperate scramble to pay the rent, to be perfectly honest. But
that's pretty cool. Yeah. Anyway, I mean, wow. Yeah, that's all that. That's wild. Just a life that like you said, part of it is just being willing to try new things and do new things. But the fact that you've branched off in so many different directions, but still with that heart, the heart of it is the same. Just how it's where it's taken you has been very varied, which is kind of very cool.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I it is really finding different ways to pursue storytelling, and then also try to make a living at it is the like what has taken me to all of these different areas. It was never a systematic plan of any kind. So it's just
plotting is easier on the page than when it comes to real life.
Yeah, and it's funny, the absurd coincidences that have changed my life in ways, like if you put those into a book, like people would be like, really? Like all of those people happen to be in the same bar at the same time, and you knew the guy at the end of the bar, and by the end of the night you were talking to the guy at the other end of the bar, and that got you a job like that. There is a certain randomness to it that in real life, you just have to sort of embrace it. But then when you try to create a coherent story about it, I think the only coherent thing you can say is that it's kind of random,
Yeah. Well, they say you make luck, you have to put yourself in the bar for something like that to happen in the first place. So I think
that's really true. And I think for anyone in a creative industry, you need to really work on your craft so that if someone gives you a big opportunity, you're able to do it. And then, you definitely need to try to put yourself into places where opportunities come your way. But then there is a certain like sheer dumb luck part of it. I think also like when I was maybe 21, I was a journalist for a student newspaper, and I interviewed a guy who had produced the movie Unforgiven because he was in Vancouver for some promo thing. And after all the big media outlets had done, they kind of threw the student paper a bone, right? But I love that movie. I thought it was brilliant, and I think his name is David Valdez. But anyway, he was Clint Eastwood's producer and had won an Oscar and all this stuff. And he said to me, and after we finished the interview, he's like, "Well, who are you? What do you do? Like, what do you want to do with your life?" And I said, "I want to be a writer." And he said, "Well, okay, I tell you what, if you have a script, I got to get on a plane today and I got nothing to read. I'll read it and I'll call you from LA and tell you what I think of it." And I didn't have a script. Like I wanted to be a writer, but I hadn't written anything. I was like 20, 21. But I was so haunted by that like missed opportunity that I was just like, okay, I'm going to have something the next time. Like the fates just send me this totally random, piece of good luck. And that has worked for me over the years, like whether it's a video game company going, "Can you come in on Saturday? Like we have a disaster. You live down the street and we know you," right? As opposed to we've done some HR process of hiring people, or like some of the other. I ended up with producing Mortal Kombat for Warner Brothers. Like it's such a weird sequence of totally stupid coincidences, but it was really just a weird sequence of totally stupid coincidences that led me to get that job. So, that sometimes that just happens.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Awesome. Very cool. Yeah, well, we're a little over about an hour and a half. Sounded like your dog's pretty eager for that walk. So hopefully we haven't taken too much of your time, but
no, it's been a ton of fun. I really appreciate it. And the game was a hoot.
Yeah,
so I'm so happy to have. I don't know if you can call it won. You don't really ever win RPGs, but I got to the end.
The last group we played died.
Yeah,
so I think you won.
If you're still standing at the end of the game on some level, you definitely you've triumphed for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it depends how you feel about Frank Hill, right? That's the deciding factor.
That's true. I didn't mean to kill him.
Frank Hill, I tell you what.
So good. Anyways, yeah. No, thank you so much again for coming on, and everyone watching. Be sure to check out both Major Domo and Jester. novella and novel to check out. And if you like that kind of it was cozy.
Cozy Stabby is what
Cozy
I'm.
Stabby. Yeah, that's so good. I love it. So Cozy Stabby featuring lots of idiots. That's how I'm always going to think about it now. So yeah, if that sounds up your alley, be sure to check those out. Links will be are already there, but and if we're missing anything, I'll add them after. So yeah, be sure to look at the description on YouTube. And thanks for those who joined on X and Facebook and everywhere else. And and links are also there to follow Tim, I believe on X and Blue Sky, and your link tree is there. So and your author website, which is, I love that website too. It's
oh, thanks so much.
perfect. Yeah. So everyone should be nice and easy to find Tim everywhere around. And otherwise, give us a like and subscribe and all that good stuff. And I think that's it for tonight. So
well, thank you guys. I just want to say it's been a real pleasure, and I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, well, it was
Pleasure's
absolutely
all
our
ours.
pleasure. Yep. Definitely a treat. So we really appreciate it. All right, we're going to do our little awkward wave and disappear, and see you next time, everybody.